In the sun-kissed cradle of Libya's western coasts, a story of empire, exile, and ambition was etched into the very sand. Here, from the 6th to the 4th century BC, exiles from the powerful city of Carthage planted the seeds of new civilizations, seeds of marble and, inevitably, blood. These weren't just colonists, they were the descendants of Phoenicians, a people who had themselves been scattered from their homeland of Tyre. Now, far from home, they sought to build a new future on the shores of North Africa. From this desperate hope, cities like Leptis Magna and Sabratha rose from the dunes, their columns reaching for a sky that had witnessed countless migrations before. Imagine weary settlers unloading their ships, their faces etched with the dust of long sea voyages and the faint, desperate glow of a new beginning. The air, heavy with the scent of sea salt, carried with it the whispers of Tyre's fall, a constant reminder of what they had lost and what they were trying to rebuild. Each stone they laid was not just part of a building, but a piece of a new identity, forged in hardship and determination. Carthage, based in modern-day Tunisia, began to systematically expand its influence over western Libya. This wasn't a gentle process. It was a strategic push to control valuable trade routes, secure resources, and create a buffer against rival powers. The local Berber tribes, who had called this land home for generations, found themselves facing a new, organized force. They watched as these Punic newcomers, bound by a shared heritage and a powerful drive, began to transform the landscape. Social bonds, once forged in the fire of shared community, were now strained by the arrival of these outsiders. A divide was born, one created by the cruel, relentless hand of conquest. As Leptis Magna grew, so did its grandeur. Grand arches, sprawling forums, and magnificent theaters spoke of immense wealth. This prosperity was fueled by trade. Ships from across the Mediterranean docked in its harbors, bringing goods, ideas, and people. The city became a bustling hub, a beacon of Punic culture and commercial power. Yet, behind the gleaming marble facades lay a hidden cost. The wealth that poured into these new cities was often built on the backs of others, and the success of the Carthaginian settlers cast long shadows over the local populations, whose lands and livelihoods were being absorbed into this new empire. Every column raised was a victory, but a victory snatched from the jaws of someone else's despair. The relationship between the Carthaginian settlers and the indigenous Berbers was complex. It wasn't just a simple story of conqueror and conquered. There was trade, interaction, and even intermingling. The Punic language and culture blended with local traditions, creating a unique Afro-Phoenician society. But the undercurrent of tension was always there. The Berbers, watching these foreign cities rise on their ancestral lands, must have felt a profound sense of displacement. Their world was changing irrevocably, their independence slowly eroding under the weight of Punic ambition. The wind that swept through the new stone archways might have carried the sounds of commerce to some. But to others, it carried a lament for a world that was vanishing. The motivation behind this expansion was multifaceted. It was partly about survival. The Carthaginians were constantly looking over their shoulders, wary of Greek rivals in cities like Cyrene to the east and the looming power of Rome across the sea. Building these fortified cities was a defensive strategy, a way to secure their western flank and control the lucrative trans-Saharan trade routes that brought gold, ivory, and enslaved people from the African interior. Each marble block was a testament not just to their wealth, but to their fears and their fragile dream of maintaining Mediterranean glory. By the 4th century BC, Leptis Magna and Sabratha had reached their peak. They were jewels of the Carthaginian Empire, testaments to what could be achieved through grit, trade, and strategic expansion. They were centers of a vibrant, hybrid culture, where Punic gods were worshipped alongside local deities. But this very success, this interconnectedness, also sowed the seeds of vulnerability. Their fate was tied to the fate of Carthage. When Carthage clashed with Rome in the epic Punic Wars, these Libyan cities were drawn into the conflict. The storms of war that began far across the sea would eventually break upon their shores. The fall of Carthage in 146 BC marked the beginning of the end for its Libyan outposts. Though the cities continued to exist and even thrive for a time under Roman rule, their original spirit, the Punic soul forged by exiles from Tyre, was forever altered. The interconnected dreams that had built these cities eventually became shattered hopes. The marble columns that once stood for power and permanence would one day crumble into ruins, silent witnesses to the rise and fall of empires. The ghosts of those early settlers, those heartbroken exiles, seemed to whisper in the winds that now blow through the forsaken stones of Leptis Magna. What drove them to such great heights? Was it purely economic and political ambition, or was there something deeper at play? Was it a divine calling, a belief that their god Melkart had summoned these spires from the desert sands? Or do the buried forums and silent amphitheaters hide a more human story, one of desperation, sorrow, and the universal need to build a home, even if it's on the foundation of someone else's loss? Libya's Carthaginian soul endures in these ruins, but the full story of its founding remains shrouded in the mists of time, a silent cry of lost exiles and forgotten dreams. As we walk through the ruins of Leptis Magna today, we are walking through the echoes of this complex history. We see the grandeur of Rome, but beneath it, if we listen closely, we can still hear the whispers of Carthage. In these forsaken stones, what untold heartaches still stand guard over the marble? What stories of hope and despair are waiting to be rediscovered? The winds of history continue to scatter the dust of empires, but the questions remain. Thanks for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and share your own reflections in the comments below. What do you think was the greatest legacy of the Carthaginians in North Africa? Let's discuss. See you next time.